Hello, good people, and welcome to Finance Skills Hub. Here, we learn, we connect, and we grow. Can we really use Excel like PowerPoint? You know how in PowerPoint, we can use the transitions and animations effect to bring in our elements and objects one at a time, engage interactions in a way to tell a story, if you like. We want to explore how to get it done in Excel, not with VBA. So we learn how to use new features like the image in cell, checkboxes, the illustration set, and then find a way to engage our audience in Excel. We've shared the start workbook with you so you can come along step by step. Promise to be exciting, so if you're game, join me in Excel and let's get started.
So meet Kwame. Fantastic guy. He's been a regular customer for the last 2 years. Kwame has been buying laptops from us, and between 2018 and 2019, revenue we generated from Kwame was 7 million Ghana cedis. In 2018, Kwame gave us 2.37 million Ghana cedis, and this doubled in 2019 to 4.63 million. If we compare the costs to get in these laptops, in 2019 we spent 3.5 million, and in 2018 we spent almost half of that. Over the 2 years, we spent 5.27 million Ghana cedis, which means that this business has been profitable. In fact, in the last 2 years, we've raised over 1.73 million in profit. In 2018, we did 600,000, and in 2019, we did 1.13, altogether giving us 1.73 million. So it has been a very good run in the last 2 years. But we've noticed a problem. Kwame's sales growth has been declining, especially in 2019. We've noticed a consistent dip in sales from Kwame. Now, we've done a little investigation, and we noticed that Kwame actually has been pitching camp with our competitor. Kwame has been asking for a discount in recent times. So we had a discussion with our boss. Currently, there's no discount on what we give Kwame. So we are making healthy profits. So what it means is that if you are to give Kwame discounts, we may have to find a middle ground to meet Kwame halfway. Now, if we take it to 10%, you realize that Kwame suddenly starts smiling, but our boss is now on the alert because his profit has dropped. If we take it to 20%, boss is not too happy. You see, he's actually frowning. Now, let's see what boss will say if we decide to do more than 20%. Wow, this isn't good. So at 30%, we are actually making losses. And Kwame is super excited. Well, we want to have a win-win situation. So we believe that the sweet spot in this discount is anywhere between 0 and 10%. Well, at least that will not make our boss shout or frown, but it's good enough to make Kwame smile and also get us some profit. And this has been the discount saga. Right, so now let's go into how we built this. This is your regular slicers. So we will create a data model in Excel, insert these slicers to allow us to interact. These are icons we call cartoon people. Now, in cartoon people, you can have the face, the body, the head, and then link it to different outputs that can help you create your story. This is also part of the icon sets in Microsoft. We will take advantage of the image in cell feature to allow us to run an if statement to bring this or turn it off. What you see here are spark lines. So spark lines allow us to put charts in cells. So they are miniature cells. Now for all the elements you see here, we've taken advantage of the merge and center to allow us to project them. Okay. Then we have our numbers here, which have been calculated in the background. Then we have our conditional formatting. Now, the key thing here are our checkboxes. So for our checkboxes, we've also created a conditional formatting here that allows us to bring the next action after the preceding one has been clicked. All these have been put together to make it a bit more engaging instead of bringing all the elements in your dashboard at a go. On the data side, we have our sales table here. So historical data, this is in the table. Then we also have a table for our discounts. So these are the two tables we are going to commit to the data model. And then we'll proceed, do our calculations, and then create our elements board, and finally build our dashboard. So if you are game, join me in Excel and let's get started. Okay, so we'll begin with our sales data. This is a table. This has been named sales. And then we also have our discount table here. Under table design, this has already been named discount. So because we'll be using the data model to create our DAX measures, the first step is to commit these two tables into Power Pivot. So here, I'll stand in this first table, go to Power Pivot, and then add this to the data model. If you are not seeing Power Pivot in your command tabs on top of the ribbon, you can activate it in the data tab. You choose the data model under the data tools group. Once you click on this, manage the data model, it should pop up your Power Pivot window. When you close that window, you should see Power Pivot here. Then you can proceed with this. So I'll stand in this table and add this to the data model. So this is currently loaded into the data model. Then I'll go on to my second table, the discount table, and do the same thing. So I'll add this to the data model as well. So currently I have two tables loaded in Power Pivot. Next up, we want to create our measures. So for the story that we told earlier, there are basically our revenue, our costs, our profits, the trend. Okay, so we need to calculate for revenue, for costs, for our profits, and then have a month-on-month revenue pivot table to plot this. So we are going to calculate these using measures in Excel. So to create our first measure, we have to look at the content of our tables. We want to create the discount that is selected at every point in time. And that is going to be a simple min over these columns. Okay, so if you haven't selected anything at all, it should just give us 0. But if you select, there can only be a single output. So it should just fetch whatever we have selected. So on this table, we'll create our min formula to grab the selected discount. And then when we are done, we'll come in and calculate our revenue, multiplying selling price by quantity for each transaction. Then we'll discount it with the discount that has been selected. Then we'll create our cost and then go on to create our profit. So let's begin with the first DAX measure. We'll come to Power Pivot, go to Measures, New Measure. This allows us to put in the inputs for our measure. So this is going to be stored in the sales table. We'll call this one Discount Selected. And we'll step down here for our measure. So our measure is going to be min, which is minimum. And we'll call our discount table. That is the discount table, and the column is going to be discount, right? So table is called discount, and the first column is also called discount. Then we'll close our bracket. You can always check your formula to be sure everything is fine. For this, we don't have to format, we just need a generic value. So we set it at general. We'll go ahead and click OK. So next up, we can now create our revenue measure. So I'll come here. The measure name is going to be revenue. Now, for the revenue, you'll notice that the way our table is set out, we can't directly create an aggregate for total revenue. We have to first multiply each line, quantity times selling price times the appropriate discount. Okay. And when we are done, we'll sum all these line by line calculations. We call it iteration, right? In DAX, we have a special function that can do this for us. So we call that SUMX. What it does is that it does the multiplication and then it sums at the end of the day. Okay. So the table is sales, which is this table. We'll bring a comma. The expression is the formula that is going to go on in that table. So bring quantity, which is this column, and then we'll multiply it by selling price, right? And then we'll go ahead and then multiply it by the selected discount. So 1 minus the selected discount. I'll use a square bracket to bring this up. So discount selected. We'll close our brackets for the one we just opened and then close the main bracket. So what this means is that if we now bring in or select a discount, this will now work to reduce the revenue that we have calculated. We check our formula, everything is fine here. This one, we can set it to 1,000 separator 2 decimal place, right? So that wherever the measure pops up, it's already formatted. So go ahead and click OK. Next up, let's create our cost. So I'll come to new measure. This is going to be our cost. Come up here. Cost is going to be the same iteration, but this time around, we are multiplying unit cost by quantity sold. We'll still call the same sales table. We'll come here, square bracket quantity times unit cost. Okay, so that is going to be our formula for cost. Again, we'll format this, use 1,000 separator, and we can check our formula to be sure everything is fine. And then once we are done, we can click OK. Right, so 3 measures so far. Let's calculate the last one, which is profit. So for profit, I'll come name this profit. Now, because we already have revenue and cost, we'll just come and call it with a square bracket. So you call existing measures with a square bracket, and then we have revenue and cost. We can set this again to 1,000 separator, check our formula to be sure everything is fine, and then we'll click OK. So in terms of this story, these are the 4 key calculations that we need to do. Now, where do we see the calculations? We did them in the data model. So we'll normally express them using pivot tables, or in some cases we use cube formulas. But for this, we are going to use pivot tables to express them. So we have a special sheet for our calculations. Okay, so if I come here, I'll go to insert a pivot table from the data model, put it in this existing worksheet. Okay, then if you come here, you see I have the columns in my sales table. So included in this table, you also see that my measures are here. Okay, so revenue, if I check it, cost is also here, and profit. Right, so these are our key calculations. Now, once these are in, we calculated the year-on-year sales change. Okay, so we can take advantage of this same pivot table. So I'm going to highlight this pivot table, Control C, right? Just paste it down here. Under normal circumstances, you should leave enough space around your pivot tables. For this demonstration, I don't expect the pivot table to go down, and that is why I'm putting it here. Now, we want to be able to break this down by year. Okay, we have 2018 and 2019. So if you go into the sales table, you realize we have some date columns here. Under normal circumstances, you should have a calendar table. But for this demonstration, we'll stick to the fact table and choose our date column from here. So I'll use order dates and bring it to the row section. Okay, so if I bring it here, I have a hierarchy of date attributes. I have year, quarter, month, and date. What I'll do is, because I'm interested in only the year, I can take off the quarter, the month, and the original order date. Right, so once this goes off, this leaves me with only the year portion. Okay, now why am I doing this? So here we want to calculate the change. Okay, so the growth year on year. So to get the percentage change year on year, I'll take this current year 2019, divide by 2018, okay, and then subtract 1. Okay, so this will give me 95%, Control Shift percentage, and then Control Right, I'll copy this to the right. Right, so this is our first calculation of the pivot table. Now, this percentage change is what we use here. So after calculating this, we also want to calculate our profit margin. Now, the profit margin in the final story is what is going to make our boss smile, shout, or be indifferent. Okay, so if it falls below a certain threshold, we link it to his facial expression. So for our profit margin, we'll come here and then we'll calculate profit margin as this profit here divided by our revenue. Okay, so that gives us 25%. Then for Kwame, the story gives us different expressions for Kwame. And this is based on the discount that has been selected. Okay, so if our boss is changing face based on profit margin, Kwame also needs an input or a driver for his facial expression. Now, this discount is what we already calculated. So if I come here, we are going to fetch the discount that we calculated. We can put in a pivot table, but you can also use cube formulas to get this done. Now, before we proceed, I want us to insert the slicers that we are going to use. So in a final story, we have a slicer for order date, a slicer for segment, and a slicer for discount. Okay, so let's do that quickly. So we stand in the first pivot table and then insert a slicer. Okay, so once we insert a slicer, we get to choose which fields or columns we want our slicer on. This is currently set to active. I'll come to all. So first we want to set it on order dates, the year, and then we'll also set it on segment, and then we'll come to the discount table and set this on the label. Now the reason we are choosing label is that we already stored the numbers as text, not actual values, so that they can be displayed well as percentages in the slicers. So these are going to be our three main slicers. Label for the discount selection, segments. So these slicers are going to be put on our dashboard. They've already been formatted. I've shared a link on how to format slicers in an earlier video, so you can take a look. But the reason I'm bringing these slicers is to show you how you can use regular formulas to bring measures you've already calculated. So for our discount, we can use the cube value, okay, and then double quotes, bring in the data model, bring a comma, then we'll call our measures with a double quote, bring a dot, and then select the discount selected, okay, which is a measure that we created. So that is how you fetch your existing measure. But we want this to be controlled by the discount slicer. So I'll put in SL, which brings all the slicers here, and then we'll put in slicer label. Then I'll close my bracket. Okay. So this is now going to control. So this slicer here, if I click on 10%, you notice I have 0.1 here, 20%, 30%, and so on, right? So you can format this as a percentage. So that's how you can use cube formulas to bring your measures into your Excel worksheet. Now, the last pivot table that we want to do is the one that shows us the trend. And this is sales growth month on month, right? So we'll take advantage of this pivot table. I always like to recycle existing pivot tables. So I'll paste this here, activate my field list, and that pivot table analyze field list. Now you see this popping up because we have tables we have not connected. In this data model, we don't need to connect our discount table and our sales table. So you can ignore that warning. Okay, so for this, we just want to show revenue. So I'll take off profits. I'll take off costs. Then we have only revenue. Then we'll break this down by order date month. So I'll take order date month into the row section. Okay, so let me place my slices right. Okay, so for our month-on-month sales change, we already have revenue here. We have the option to right click and show value as. Okay, so show value as, we have some options here. Percentage difference from is what we are looking for. So we'll set this. The base field is order date, and the base item, we are going to set it to previous. Okay, and we'll click OK. So based on this, we can now see the sales growth trend by year, okay, and by segment based on the slices that we have. Now, this completes all the calculations that we need to do. So at this point, we can go ahead and then build the characters and the elements in our story. Okay, so for our elements page, we basically want to organize all the calculations we've done, and also the characters that we are going to use, the icons, the cartoon people, organize them in such a way that it will be easier to put a certain narrative around all the elements. So we will proceed with this elements page. Okay, so first I'm going to bring in our calculations. So I'll copy revenue, cost, profit. So Control C, come to my elements, Control Alt V for paste special, and I'll choose values and choose transpose so that I can have it in a vertical orientation, right? Then for the values, I'll highlight all the values here, Control C, come to my elements, paste this, Control Alt V, paste it as a link, right? So that all the formulas will be linked up, referencing the calculation sheet. In that case, I can just cut this, paste this here, cut this one, and then paste this as well. Okay, so next up, let's bring in the calculation for the change and then the profit margin. So let me move our slicer out a bit. So for change, I'll take change, profit margin, and discount, Control C, come to my elements page, and then I'll paste these here. Okay, so for change, we'll take these three, Control C, come to my elements, Control Alt V, and then paste as link. Then profit margin, we can directly reference them. These are single cell values. Okay, and then our discount is also here. So if it's all in one place, it makes it easier. Okay, now let's talk about our cartoon people. If you go to insert, okay, and you are using the recent version of Excel, under your icon set, you should have a tab for cartoon people. Okay, so when you click on cartoon people, you see there are different categories: characters, half characters, heads, faces, and so on. So this requires a bit of creativity to put these elements together to create your story. Now, the way Microsoft has done this, these images can be put in a cell using the image in cell and then linked to formulas, right? So let me do an example with how we created Kwame, and then once we get the concepts, we'll just copy the rest of the elements. So for Kwame, we'll first look for the body. Okay, so for Kwame's full body, we'll click on full body, and then you come all the way down, right? So I was looking for somebody in an African print. So this is Kwame's body. So I'll select this. Okay. Then we also need Kwame's head. So I'll choose Kwame's head. So Kwame's head is here. Okay. So Kwame's head, and you don't really have the face elements. So this is fine. Then we can choose the face or the facial expression. Okay. So this is where you can choose between the excited, the indifferent, the SAD, and all those ones, right? So I'm just doing an example for you to see. Then I'll insert all these three that I have selected. Okay. So what's going to happen is that if I bring in these elements, okay, I can now, if you like, position them. So I just take Kwame's head on top of his body and then put in his facial expression, right? These are graphics, right? So we have to convert them into an image. So I'll select this first portion, which is the face, hold Control, select the head, and then hold Control, select the body. Under the graphics tab, I have the option to group. Okay, so this now becomes a full image of Kwame excited. Now, because I want 4 expressions, what I created was an expression where Kwame is sad, an expression where Kwame is smiling, super smiling, and excited, right? So these 4 will now be linked to a table that actually progresses in the same order. Okay, where the discount goes up, we'll also go through a lookup table that will fetch these images. So that's basically the concept. Now, this is a graphic. So what we need to do is convert it into an image. There are several ways to do that. You can take a screenshot or you can copy, okay, and then come right click and then paste as an image. Now, when you paste as an image, in recent versions of Excel, you get the option to place this image in a cell. So if I click place in a cell, this now becomes something you can use in your calculations, reference, use in a lookup and all that. Okay. If you like, you can also place over cells to show you how this looks. Okay. So basically that's how we build these characters. So now that you understand, I want to show you how we created a table out of this. So this is the table that we created, showing the 4 different expressions of Kwame. When he's indifferent, when he's happy, when he's happier, and when he's excited. In each, we've also placed the image that corresponds to that expression in there, okay, against the label. Then you have the corresponding values 0 to 30 in ascending order. Right, so that is the table that we are going to use for Kwame. I'm going to copy this. Control C. Come to my elements table and then paste this. Okay, so what it means is that I can do a lookup and then bring the required expression using the discount that has been selected. So I'll copy this one as well for our boss. Alt HBA to put in border lines, Control C, come here and then paste this as well. So once this comes in, there are 2 more things that we need to copy. The laptop that Kwame is buying from us. Okay, this is how it looks like. So again, this one is also available under the icon sets. So we will go to icons and it opens up. You can find these objects under illustrations. Okay, so there are lots of objects that you can use, like the design. I particularly like the minimal design in each case. Okay, so you can combine any of these to create your story, school bus, a ball, and all that. Okay, so that's what we've used here. And then finally, we also have the axis for our sparkline. Okay, we don't normally have an axis when we create sparklines, so we created values in cells and then also converted this into an image and then replaced it in a cell. Right. So basically that is the architecture for what we did. So I'm going to copy this, the laptop, and then also copy the x-axis and then come and complete the elements worksheet. Okay. So this is how we are going to build our elements. Okay. Okay, so let's proceed and create our dashboard. Now for our dashboard, we've already laid it out, but I'll walk you through the layout. So for every place where we expect an output, we have merged the cell to project. Okay, so this is where Kwame would appear. It's currently blank. And then this is where the laptop would appear, also blank. Then our key values are also going to be here. Right, Then we'll have our year-on-year comparison also here. And then we have our checkboxes also here. Now, this is how the checkboxes operate. If you go to the Insert tab, you see the option for checkbox. So checkbox is one of the recent additions in Excel. It allows us to insert a checkbox. So what happens is that if you check that box, it evaluates to true. If you don't check it, you have a false value. So we'll take advantage of this switch to bring in our elements. So as an example, I can say that if this is checked, okay, now because this is true by default, when it's checked, I don't need to set this to equal to true, okay. So we normally just reference the cell. So if this is true, comma, then action. If not, then no action. Okay, so that's how we're going to be doing this. So if I check this, there's action. If I don't check this, there's no action, right? So that's how we're going to use this. Now, what we've done is that we've placed these checkboxes right here, okay, to bring in the elements as we check them. We've used conditional formatting. So this is how the conditional formatting works. You already have some values here, as you can see. So this value here has been colored the same color as the background. Okay, so if I choose black, you realize the value is there, but it has been formatted the same color. It only shows black if this is checked true, right? And that is what we've used to set this conditional format. Okay, so if I come here and you realize that this references S8. So if this is equal to S8, which means if this is true, then the format should be that the color should appear, right? But the key trick here is that when you are setting S8, you set it and lock only the column and allow the row 8 to be relative so you can copy it down, right? So that is how we created this. Now, let's bring in Kwame. But before that, let's bring in the laptop because that one is pretty straightforward. Now, for the laptop, I need to check this. If this is true, then the laptop should populate, right? That is the rule. So I'm going to run a simple if formula. So if this, which is S10, is selected, then I'll come to my elements page and look for my laptop, which I fix here. Right, so if not, comma, then double quote, which means blank. Okay, so I'll close this. So I have something like this. Right. So because of the merge cell, it's already projected when it comes in. So no laptop, this goes off. Bring laptop, this is checked. Right, so that is how you connect it to your narration. Now, let's bring in Kwame. So for Kwame, we have to bring our slicers. And then we see the effect the slicer, the discount selection will have on Kwame. So let's go to our calculations and then bring in our slicers. I'll select the first one, hold Control, select the second one, hold Control, select the third. Control X to cut. Okay. Normally with slicers, if they are linked to formulas, the formula has a temporal error until you paste them back. So Control V, paste everything, enable, and then you have your slicers here. Right. So you can now arrange our slicers. So order date is here, segment is here, and then we have our label here. Right. So these slicers have already been formatted. So I'll go to the slicer tab and I'll choose this minimal black and white design, which has the same background as our dashboard here. So I'll choose this one as well and then apply same to this. While we are here, we can rename this discounts, okay, to make it easier. Now, when you bring in slicers, you can arrange the columns or decide the number of columns in there. We want to make this 2 columns so that the year sits side by side. Okay, so I have something like this. So this is going to be for order dates. And then for segments, we'll break this into 3. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. If you like, you can reduce the width a bit, or you can increase it based on the space that you have for this. So this is going to occupy there. And then I'll just resize. Okay. Then finally, we have our discount. So for our discount, there are 10 patterns in there. So I'll make it 10 columns, stretch this all the way, and then we have our discount. Right. So I'm setting this so that when we are done, we'll see whether this can control Kwame's expression. Now, for Kwame, we have a table that shows the different expressions from indifferent to super excited. Right. So first, let's do our switch. So if this checkbox is selected for Kwame, which is true, we want to do an X lookup. Okay, so we'll do an X lookup, and then the lookup value is going to be the discount that has been selected. And remember, we calculated this earlier. So in the elements, this is the discount that has been selected. Okay, that is our lookup value. Then I'll bring a comma. The lookup array is the corresponding discounts in my table. So I'll come and highlight this for the lookup array. And the return array is the corresponding image for each discount selected in this case. Right. We are assuming that we may have discounts in between the thresholds. If that is your case, you can bring comma, go to the match mode and select the exact match on next smaller item for approximate matching. Okay, so that will be -1. And I'll close my brackets for X lookup. Then I have to bring in the value for false, comma, double quote, for false, and then I'll close my brackets. Okay, so we have something like this, right? So this is going to be my if S8, which is a checkbox, X lookup, my element, which is the discount here. Okay, then I'll match this discount with the value here, and then my lookup array is going to be the image, comma, -1 for exact match the smaller item, double quote, right? So that's how we go about it. I'm going to press enter. So you can see that I now have Kwame, who as at 0 is not really happy. But if I choose 10, start smiling. If I choose 20, super smiling. 30, yay, excited, right? So it means this is working, right? So we can now use this to trigger whatever expression that we want from Kwame. Right, so we now have 2 elements in. Let's bring in our revenue. So for our revenue, again, we need to check this box. So I'll run my formula if this is checked, what we want is to come to our elements page and bring in our revenue, which we've calculated here, comma, double quote, close our brackets, right? So this comes in blank because we have not checked this. So I'll check, and then we have 7 million here. Earlier, we'd already set this label to the same value. So if S12, then we type the text revenue here, GHS million, otherwise blank, right? So these two are tied to S12, right? So let's bring in the cost and the profit in the same way. So again, equal to if this is checked, I'll come to my elements, select cost, otherwise double quote, close bracket. Okay, then I can now choose cost, which comes in with a label which is set to the same cell as well. Then I'll bring in my profit. So for profits, equal to if this is checked, I'll come in here in my elements, come and select our profit, comma, double quote, close, and then we have our profit. If this comes in here, we have our profit here, right? So that is how we are going to do this. Now, that's year-on-year change. Again, we calculated it. So let's find a way to bring it in. In the end, it's going to be formatted like this. So we've applied a conditional format on this already, right? So that conditional format is set to the same rule that if S12 is checked, which is revenue, and F14 is greater than 0. So F14 in this case is this value, okay, then it should color the font green and the background a lighter green. So there are two conditions that have to be met here, right? So you can use this formula to set the conditional format. But the key thing here is I want to show you how to add the shape or the symbol to this, okay? So let's set this. So if this is revenue, comma, we want to fetch this 95%. Okay, but here's the thing. We want to format this with text. So I'll come in here, use a text. Text allows you to take a value, in this case this value, and apply the right text format. So you can put in the script directly in double quote. So comma, double quote, I want this expressed in 2 decimal point percentage values. So 0.00 percentage, right? Now beyond this, I want to bring in the pipe and insert this symbol, which is the up arrow symbol, this one. Okay, so I'm going to insert this and click OK and double quote to conclude the format and then close my brackets. Okay, so this is my true value. Now in this case study, we assume that there's only going to be a positive change, but if there was a chance sales dropped, you could add a second condition to this and then put in the down arrow, which I will show you in the case of cost. So let's maintain this positive output for now, and then comma, double quote for the false value, close double quote. I'm going to copy this because I'll use it again in the cost section. So this is going to be my formula when it comes in here. So it's set to this text, the element in C8, formatted double quote 0.00 percentage pipe, the symbol double quote close double bracket, close bracket, comma, double quote close regular bracket, right? So I'm going to paste a similar formula here. So instead of S12, we'll bring this to S14, and the element that is going to drive this will come to the elements page. So instead of C8, we are going to choose D8, which is the change for cost year on year. Okay, we'll maintain this, but this arrow has to come down. So I'll back this out, come to the symbol, and then choose this down pointing arrow. Insert that, and I'll close. Okay, so again, if you want, or there's a chance this can go up and down, you can maintain that and create a second output for that. So I'll press this, and this gives me 97.89 pointing downwards. For profits, it will be similar to revenue, but just that we'll bring this here instead, and this is going to point to in the elements E8. Okay, arrow will still show, and then I'll press enter. So this gives me 86.48. So all these would be triggered based on our selection, right? So if you want to bring them in, you call, and then all the values will show up like that. So the next item we want to look at is the trend. Okay, so the trend here is going to be a spark line. So spark lines are miniature charts we put in cells. Now this is going to be created using this pivot table that we used. Okay, so we are going to use these values because for spark lines you really can't use labels, just the values. Okay, but what we want to do is we want to only show the values if the checkbox for trend is checked. Right, so if this is checked, okay, we already have the label set here. So if S18, this label should come. But we also want this to bring the spark line. Now in Excel charts, if values are NAs or errors, they cannot be plotted. Okay, so for our false value, we want NAs, but for our true values, we want to show the actual values. So first, let's go and create the errors. So what we do is that we say if this box is checked, then we want you to bring the value here. Otherwise, bring an NA. Okay, open close brackets and then you close your final bracket. So you have to lock this logical test. So F4 to lock this, and I'll press enter. Gives us 0 for now. If I copy this down, I get my values for the spark line. Control Shift %. Okay, so what's going to happen is that if this is not checked, if I come to my calculations, I have my NAs, right? If it's checked, then my values will pop up, right? So you stand in here where we have the spark line, okay, and we'll go to insert spark line. We are using the line version, okay, so our location range is going to be here. I'll select this again. Then to our data range, I'll use this up arrow, go to the calculations and then highlight these values. Okay, then I'll click OK. So now my spark line pops up, right? So let's test it. Goes off, comes in, right? So then with the spark lines, you can actually format them. So you can choose the spark line color. We chose green for this. You can also put in markers if you like. So you can put in black markers to show, right? As I mentioned earlier, spark lines don't have labels. So we created our own label, which we made a picture, and we can tie that to this checkbox. So equal to, if this trend is selected, we'll come here, go to our elements, and we'll bring in this x-axis, January to December actually. Otherwise, double quotes, close our brackets. So we have something like this. So this will now come together. The label, the spark line, and the x-axis label for months. Right. So hopefully you are following how we are doing this, and I'll be happy to see how you can put these elements to create your own narrative in Excel. The last thing we're going to do is for our boss. Okay, so our boss will be like the way we brought in Kwame. So here, this is the space for our boss, which has been merged. So to bring in the boss, we would do a similar formula for Kwame. So if this is selected, okay, we'll bring a comma, introduce the X lookup. Now for our boss, the trigger or the lookup value is going to be in the elements page, the profit margin, which we selected here, which we have put here, 25%. I'll bring a comma. This is going to be matching the corresponding values for profit margin, which we have put in a range 0 to 30%. Okay. Then for the return array, which is our output, the different expressions moving from furious to independent. Right. Now, the boss is working the opposite way. Okay. So for our approximate lookup value, we'll choose +1, which is the next larger item. So it will read in the reverse, right? So we'll choose 1 in this case. Close our bracket, 4x lookup, comma, then double quote for the false value. Okay. So let's see how this works. So boss comes in, right? So 0% is happy, 10% alert on his face. Kwame starts smiling, 20% frowning, 30% starts shouting, right? So he starts shouting. Okay. So is how we put this together. And hopefully you've taken some key lessons here. This is something that I'm sure if you add a bit of creativity, you should be able to create a more engaging story in your Excel, right? So your slicers, your cartoon people, your illustrations, your spark lines, image in cells, checkboxes. You put all these together, especially if you are using Power Pivot DAX, you can use these slicers and these elements in a very interactive way. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll look forward to seeing your wonderful stories in Excel. See you in the next video.
If this video was helpful and you would like to receive more of these videos directly on your WhatsApp, you can send ad to this WhatsApp number. We'll add you to our broadcast list so you receive our videos directly. You can also visit our YouTube channel, Finance Skills Hub. All our old videos are here. Please subscribe for notification of new videos or connect with us on any of these social media handles. Thank you so much for watching.